So a little bit about the genes which are controlling this. And again, this is somewhat fascinating because it turns out that there are some so-called homeobox genes which are basically coding the structure of the nervous system or the structure of the whole body. So it's regulator genes which sort of calls upon a specific sequence of genes, like a full package, which will sort of define where is the leg, where is the arm, where is the head, where is the caudal part of the organism, where is the cephalic part of the organism, what is ventral, what is dorsal, etc. So it's basically a sequence of genes which are situated on a particular part of a chromosome, and which will define the sequence of these different genes, which will code in this instance, for instance, for the digits and the arm in a specific sequence. The interesting thing, I think, here is that this gives a good insight to how the whole thing is structured in order to create an organism, basically. It turns out that if you take these homeobox genes and put them into a chromosome of another organism. So you can basically take the human homeobox gene sequence and put it into a fly or a frog or whatever, and it will still encode the body structure of that animal. So it's highly conserved genes which basically define how an animal should be organized. The actual genes which decide whether it's a fly or whether it's a frog or whether it's a human are something else. These are regulatory genes which just call upon all of those other genes. But they basically define that here we have maybe a mammal, here we have a fly, here we have a worm with that body structure that we need in order to have that organism. But it's all basically organized in pretty much the same way, that you have some kind of a cephalic region, a caudal region, you have something ventral, something dorsal, etc., which sort of gives the same body structure. There are slight differences in how things look when you look at insects versus mammals, for instance, mammals versus other types of invertebrates in general. But these are relatively small differences, and it very often turns out that it's just a slight alteration of one of these genes which defines a slightly different organization of the body. So if you look at all animals, there aren't that many differences. So certainly you can see insects which have 8 legs or something, but they all come in pairs, and it's just duplication of basically the set of genes which define a pair of arms, and you just duplicate that, and then you get twice as many, and then you duplicate it. In the end, you have 3 times as many, and that's all. But it's basically the same structure, it's the same organization. There are slight differences, like in our lineage, you could say, vertebrates. We have our spinal cord on the back side of the body, in the dorsal part of the body, whereas insects have it in the ventral part of the body. But that's, again, just more or less a single mutation which has defined where that body structure should be in relation to other parts, basically where the ectoderm almost should be situated in relation to the mesoderm. And that also relates to how we should understand development in general. Because one thing is that we have these genes which define where things should be, but when we've started looking at it for real, I mean, it's not that long ago that we thought that we were bound to have millions of different genes which could define all of these intricate functions and features that we have as human subjects. But it turns out that it's not like that. When we look at the genes that we have, there are definitely problems. We probably have just around 25,000 genes or so, that's all. That's 25,000 genes which define 25,000 proteins. That's what it's all about. So we have 25,000 different building blocks that we can play around with. That's all. compared to that, just an onion has 100,000 genes. It doesn't need all of them, I think, but from an evolutionary point of view, quite a lot of them probably didn't really matter, so the onion has kept them, even though it doesn't really use them for that much. But it just goes to tell you that there are quite a lot of proteins also being defined in an onion versus a human subject. So it's not really about the building blocks. It's about what you can build with those building blocks and what kind of thing you end up building with those building blocks. I think a real argument also that it's not about the genes is that all our cells in the body contain the same genes. So the DNA is the same. Whether you have a liver cell or you have a neuron, it's exactly the same genes that you have there. So why can you have a liver cell coming from those genes and a neuron coming from some other genes? The reason is that it's all about the gene expression. It's which genes are being used, what kind of building blocks are being used, at what time are they being used in order to create a neuron, in order to create a liver cell. And therefore it's also, I mean, people have been fascinated by the fact that we share genes with gorillas, chimpanzees, etc., to a very high extent. So there's 1% difference between us and a chimpanzee. And this, of course, it shows that we are very closely related, but we're also relatively closely related to a frog from a point of view of the genes. It's not about the genes again, it's about how those genes are being made, which can create that difference. So what we do know now is that all of these regulator genes, which are in the DNA, are being strongly regulated by the environment. So one thing is that we definitely have a program which sort of defines some of the events which are going to take place during development, but if the environment is not there in order to make sure that some of those events actually take place, it won't happen. So it's an intricate interaction between the genes and the immediate environment which determines that this organism, the nervous system, is finally being developed the way it is. It goes for the whole body, it goes for the development of us, basically. We know quite a lot of the mechanisms which regulate this gene expression. It's many of the same mechanisms that you have already encountered in general in physiology. So many of the same signaling mechanisms that are involved in neurotransmission, involved in the endocrinological system, in the effect of hormones. Quite a lot of that regulation that you have encountered there also takes place during development and is responsible for this interaction between the genetic program and the signaling from the environment.